All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're taking a deep dive into some really fascinating stuff. You sent over some incredible research on ancient history and geology. We're talking academic papers, intriguing images, even your personal reflections on geological formations and ancient myths.
It really seems like you're drawn to the idea that Earth's past might be even more dynamic and mysterious than we typically think.
Oh, absolutely. There's a real sense of wonder in these sources. This idea of lost landscapes, forgotten knowledge, maybe even civilizations lost to time, it's captivating.
Lost civilizations, you say?
Okay, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Let's rewind a bit. A lot of these sources focus on a period around 10,000 to 12,000 years ago. They say Earth looked radically different back then, especially when it comes to sea level. So what was going on back then?
Well, picture this. During the last ice age, sea levels were way lower than they are today, sometimes by hundreds of feet.
Hundreds of feet, wow.
It's because these massive ice sheets held so much water captive that the coastlines stretched out way beyond what we see on maps today.
You know what?
Yeah.
That actually makes a lot of sense when I think about those maps you sent to Florida. The peninsula practically doubles in size. Was it really that different?
Florida is a really great example, actually. Imagine the entire eastern coastline of the U.S. extending hundreds of miles further out, and it gets even more dramatic. The British Isles, which today we picture as, separate islands, were once connected to mainland Europe.
Wow, I never even thought about that.
Yeah, that entire landscape was submerged as those ice sheets melted.
That's a massive amount of change to wrap my head around. Honestly, my brain wants to default to thinking about slow, gradual change, like the erosion we see today.
And that's where our understanding of Earth's history gets really interesting. For a long time, the dominant view in geology was this thing called uniformitarianism. It's the idea that the present is the key to the past. Basically, it assumes that all the geological processes shaping the Earth today, they've always acted at roughly the same rate, slow and gradual, just like you were saying.
So slow and steady wins the race. Makes sense to me. But what about these sudden, massive shifts in the landscape we're talking about? How does that fit into this slow and gradual picture?
That's where the opposing view comes in, catastrophism. It argues that these sudden, large-scale events, like massive floods, volcanic eruptions, even asteroid impacts, have actually played a major role in sculpting Earth's features. And you know what? Sometimes the evidence for these catastrophic events is right under our noses, even if it takes a while for the scientific community to really accept it.
Okay, now you've got me intrigued. Do you have an example of one of those times when the evidence for a catastrophic event was staring everyone in the face, but they just couldn't see it? I love a good science mystery.
Oh, absolutely. A perfect example is this story of J. Harlan Brett's and the channeled scablands in Washington state.
Okay, the channeled scablands.
So picture a landscape with these deep canyons, dry waterfalls, and giant potholes carved into solid rock. Now, he was convinced that these features couldn't have been formed just by slow erosion alone.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
They were just too big, too dramatic. So he proposed that this massive flood, which he called the Spokane Flood, had ripped through the entire region thousands of years ago, carving out the landscape almost in an instant, geologically speaking.
Okay, so this massive flood carves out these incredible features. Sounds like a pretty solid theory, right? What did other scientists say?
Well, not so fast. Brett's ideas were actually met with intense resistance at first. The scientific community was so set on this idea of uniformitarianism, this slow and gradual change, that they really struggled to accept a catastrophic explanation, even when the evidence was right in front of them.
Wow. Talk about being stuck in your ways. That's incredible.
It really is. And it took decades for Brett's flood hypothesis to gain wider acceptance.
Wow. Decades.
Yeah, it really highlights how challenging it can be to change established paradigms, even when you have compelling evidence. And it makes you wonder what else we might be missing, especially when we start factoring in the possibility of not just floods, but like cosmic events, asteroid impacts.
Asteroid impacts. Okay, now we're talking. This is where it starts to feel like a disaster movie. In a good way, of course. Tell me more about these asteroid impacts, especially around that 10,000, 12,000 year ago time period that seems so crucial.
This is where the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis comes into play.
The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis.
Yeah. It centers around this period of really rapid climate change, known as the Younger Dryas event, which happened around 12,900 years ago.
Wait, wasn't that right when those potential lost civilizations you mentioned might have been around?
That's the really intriguing part. And what makes the Younger Dryas event even more interesting is that it coincided with the extinction of a lot of large mammals like woolly mammoths, for example, and even the disappearance of some early human cultures like the Clovis people in North America.
Okay, hold on. Let's recap for a second because this is a lot to take in.
Yep.
We're talking about a period of rapid climate change, mass extinctions, and the disappearance of entire human cultures all around the same time. Is there any actual evidence that all of this was caused by an impact? Or is this just speculation at this point?
There's actual physical evidence, and it's pretty compelling. Researchers have found a layer of sediment dating back to the Younger Dryas boundary, and it contains some very unusual materials, things you really wouldn't expect to find naturally.
Like what? Don't leave me hanging. What kind of unusual materials are we talking about?
We're talking about things like nanodiamonds, melted glass-like substances, and this really distinctive black matte layer that's been found at sites all over the world.
Hold on. Nanodiamonds. Like tiny diamonds from space. That sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel.
It does, doesn't it? But it makes sense, though. Nanodiamonds, they form under really intense heat and pressure, the kind of conditions you'd expect from a large impact event.
Okay.
And then the melted materials point to some extreme temperatures as well. And that black matte layer, it's full of soot and charcoal, which is, evidence of these widespread wildfires that could have easily been triggered by an impact.
Okay, you're blowing my mind here. So we've got geological evidence of some major changes in Earth's past, a potential impact event that seems to line up with the disappearance of all these species and cultures.
Yeah.
And now you're telling me there's physical evidence like these nanodiamonds. It's starting to feel like all the pieces of a giant puzzle are coming together.
And here's where it gets even more fascinating. You have this whole collection of sources on ancient myths and astronomical knowledge.
Right.
And what's interesting is that these sources often point to this deep awareness of potential dangers from the sky.
It's like these ancient cultures were trying to tell us something, to warn us about these cycles of destruction. Is that too out there?
Perhaps not. Think about it. These stories, passed down through generations, they speak of floods, cataclysms, and celestial events that sound eerily similar to what we know about the Younger Dryas impact. So could these be echoes of a shared memory, a collective trauma that was encoded in their myths and legends? It's possible.
Okay, now you're really making me think. So it's not just that these ancient cultures observed the skies, but I might have also understood the very real threat of something catastrophic happening. And maybe they were trying to pass down that knowledge to prepare future generations.
Exactly. And it wasn't just through stories either. A lot of ancient structures like Stonehenge and the pyramids of Egypt, they demonstrate a pretty sophisticated understanding of astronomy.
I've always been fascinated by ancient structures like Stonehenge. It's amazing how they were built with such precision, especially without modern technology. But what's the connection between these structures and, say, an impact event?
Well, we know that Stonehenge is aligned with solstices and equinoxes, but some researchers believe it went even further. They suggest it might have been used to, track other celestial events, things like eclipses or even the paths of comets. And here's the crucial part. If these ancient civilizations really did experience a devastating impact in the past, it would make sense for them to develop this really sophisticated astronomical knowledge to try and predict future events.
So it's like those alignments weren't just about observing the heavens. They were about understanding them, about predicting potentially dangerous events, maybe even trying to prevent another catastrophe. That's a completely different way of looking at ancient cultures, not as primitive or superstitious, but as incredibly advanced in their own right.
And what's remarkable? There's actually a growing body of evidence that suggests some ancient cultures might have possessed knowledge and technologies that we are only beginning to rediscover today. Take, for example, the Antikythera mechanism.
Wait, the what? I've never even heard of that. What is the Antikythera mechanism?
It's this ancient Greek artifact. A lot of people describe it as the world's oldest known analog computer.
An ancient Greek computer. Seriously, what did it do?
It was incredible, really. It was discovered in this ancient shipwreck off the coast of Greece.
A shipwreck?
Yeah, and it dates back over 2,000 years. Just imagine this complex system of gears and dials all crafted with this incredible precision, and it could actually track the movements of the sun, the moon, the planets.
It could track all of that.
Oh, yeah. It could even predict eclipses, and it could even account for the irregular orbit of the moon.
Wow. That's mind-blowing. It really makes you wonder what else these ancient civilizations were capable of. Going through all this research with you, it really makes me realize how much our understanding of the past is shaped by, like, the assumptions we make. We talked about uniformitarianism earlier, this whole idea that things have always changed at the same slow and steady pace. But it seems like that way of thinking might have really blinded us to the possibility of more dynamic, even catastrophic events shaping our planet and human history.
You've hit on something really crucial there. For too long, I think there has been a tendency to kind of underestimate the capabilities of ancient cultures.
Right.
We see their monuments, their art, their myths, but a lot of times we view them through the lens of our modern perspective.
Right.
But what if we've got it all wrong, you know?
Yeah.
What if these cultures possessed this knowledge and wisdom that we've kind of lost touch with? Knowledge that could be essential for understanding our place in the cosmos and maybe even ensuring our survival.
It's like we're just scratching the surface of what's really out there, both in terms of Earth's history, but then also the achievements of these ancient civilizations. So after this deep dive into ancient mysteries, what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from all of this?
If I had to distill it down to one essential message, I think it would be this: never lose your sense of wonder. The universe is full of mysteries. And the more we explore, the more we realize how much we don't know. Our planet's past is way more dynamic and mysterious than we often give it credit for. And you know what? The wisdom of ancient cultures, it just might hold some of the clues to navigating the challenges of the present and the future.
I love that. Never lose your sense of wonder, because that's what drives us to learn, to explore, to question everything we think we know, to remember that we are part of something so much larger than ourselves, a story that stretches back, millennia and reaches out into the vast expanse of the cosmos.
Exactly. And maybe, just maybe, in piecing together all those fragments of knowledge that remain from Earth's dynamic past, we might just rediscover something profound about ourselves and our place in the universe.
Well said. Well, that's about all the time we have for today's deep dive, but I have a feeling this is really just the beginning of your exploration. Remember, everyone, the journey of discovery is often more important than the destination. So who knows what ancient secrets are still out there, just waiting to be uncovered. Keep asking questions, keep seeking answers, and never ever underestimate the power of a curious mind. Until next time, keep exploring.